It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Every detail had been planned, every flower petal, every seat, every song. Olivia's family came from all over the country to be there. Her cousins, her childhood friends, even her 90-year-old grandmother made the trip. But my family? My parents, my sister, my brother? One by one, the week before, they called with the same excuse: "We're so sorry, we tested positive. We can't come." I didn't question it. I felt bad for them. I sent photos of the rehearsal, the cake, the decorations, thinking maybe, just maybe, it would make them feel included. But on the wedding day, the truth hit me harder than I expected. My side of the aisle looked empty. Embarrassingly empty. If it weren't for a couple of aunts, some distant cousins, and a few college friends, it would have looked more like a school assembly than a wedding. I forced a smile. Olivia held me together, and her family, they treated me like I'd always been one of them. That part was beautiful, and for a moment, I believed that was all that mattered. The morning after, though, reality came crashing down. I sat on the edge of our hotel bed, still in my undershirt, scrolling aimlessly through Facebook. And then, I saw it. A group photo. Palm trees, bright sun, ocean waves in the background. My entire family, my parents, my siblings, their spouses, even my cousin Jake who supposedly was too sick, posing on a beach in Hawaii. All of them. Together. Smiling. The caption? Real family together. No one left out. I swear I could hear the waves through that photo, taunting me. My stomach dropped. Not a single mention of me. Not a single word about my wedding. Just hashtags, laughter, and comments about how happy they all looked. I didn't blow up. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone out. I just hit like. And then I typed 6 words: "Fine. Now you can pay without me." Then I left the family group chat. Silence. Not one of them responded. For the next 2 days, I buried myself in helping Olivia's parents clean up the venue, finalizing our license, tying up loose ends. I didn't breathe a word about what I'd seen. Not yet. But when it came time to head home, I went alone. Olivia stayed behind a little longer with her family. You see, while I was traveling for work over the years, my family had been living in the house my grandfather left me. Rent-free. My dad once said, "You're saving us, Ethan. You don't even know it." At the time, I believed him. Now, I knew the truth. So I changed the locks before they even landed back on the mainland. I boxed up their things. And I left a notice. They had 7 days. 7 days to find somewhere else. When they finally showed up, they didn't yell. They didn't curse. They just stared at me like I was a stranger, like they didn't recognize the man standing in front of them. I didn't care. I grabbed my bag, walked out, and went to stay with Olivia and her family. And now, they're the ones knocking. "We want to talk. Please open the door. We're your family." But I stayed quiet. Because for the first time in my life, I realized something they never taught me: family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up for you when it matters most. And this time? They're going to learn exactly what real family looks like. I thought they'd stay gone longer. Maybe they'd stretch out the lie, post more palm tree photos, and then quietly slip back into town like nothing happened. But on the 6th morning after the wedding, I woke to the sound of suitcase wheels grinding across the driveway. That grating noise cut through my half-sleep like nails on a chalkboard. Still in gym shorts, coffee steaming in my hand, I pulled the curtain back from the upstairs window. And there they were, my family, standing in front of the house like a sitcom family that had missed their cue. My mom had a pink flower lay around her neck, still clinging to the vacation vibe. My sister wore pigtails with little beads clinking when she turned her head. My dad was fanning himself, already whining about the heat, while my brother stood there with his arm draped casually around his girlfriend, all of them looking tan, relaxed, like life had been good. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. My brother pulled out his keys, confident, casual. Click. Nothing. He frowned, tried again. Click. Still nothing. The confusion on their faces was almost funny, like the concept that things might have changed had never even crossed their minds. I could practically see the gears turning. Maybe the lock was jammed? Maybe the batteries died? Maybe the house just glitched? They knocked. Then rang the bell. Knocked again. By the 4th round, my phone buzzed. A text from my sister: "What's wrong? Why won't the door open?" I sipped my coffee, typed back slowly: "You have 7 days to leave. After that, you'll be evicted." No, hi. No, let's talk. No explanations. That night, they camped out on the porch like stray cats. My dad yelled through the windows about how this was still their home. My mom cried. My brother screamed loud enough for the neighbors to hear, calling me a psychopath. I didn't flinch. I didn't even open the curtain. My neighbor, Miss Felton, texted me a heart emoji and a simple, "Proud of you." That meant more than anything they could have shouted. Day 2 came. They were quieter, switching from noise to reason. My mother slid a folded note under the door. I didn't touch it. Day 3, they vanished most of the afternoon, came back with greasy burgers and fries, and spread out in the backyard like it was some kind of picnic. I watched them through the security camera feed on my phone. They looked tired. Sunburned. Almost desperate, but still pretending it was fine. And then came day 4. That's when the fraud alert hit my phone. A cheap motel 2 towns over. I frowned, confused, until I remembered, an old joint account. A debit card I thought I'd shredded years ago. Apparently, I hadn't. I called the bank and had them pull the entire transaction history. And when the list came through, it felt like reading a confession, line by line. 2 first-class tickets to Maui. 3 coach. 7 nights at a luxury resort. For spa appointments. Snorkeling tours. Jet ski rentals. brunch spots, souvenir shops, thousands of dollars. All of it, under my name. I just sat there, staring at the screen, my coffee gone cold in my hand. Olivia was in the next room, humming while she cooked dinner. I didn't say anything right away, not because I wanted to keep it secret, but because I didn't even know how to put the words together without something inside me snapping. They lied. They skipped my wedding. They laughed about it on a beach. And now I knew, they had used my money to do it. That night, I finally told Olivia everything. About the account. About the charges. About the lie. About all of it. She listened quietly, then poured me a glass of whiskey. She didn't try to soften it. She just put the glass in my hand and said, "You know what you have to do." The next morning, I started dialing numbers. The eviction was already underway, but this was going to be different. I wasn't just going to throw them out. I was going to make them pay back every single dollar they burned on that beach. And this time, they weren't going to see it coming. They didn't leave on the 7th day. That morning, I drove by just to see for myself. I didn't even shut the car off, just sat there across the street with the engine humming. My mom shuffled around the driveway in a bathrobe, wringing her hands. My dad leaned against the U-Haul, smoking like the world was ending. The truck was only half full, boxes stacked unevenly inside. It looked less like a family preparing to move and more like people who'd given up halfway, waiting for me to blink first. At 4 p.m., the sheriff's cruiser rolled up behind them. Civil process, nothing flashy, nothing cinematic. Just business. I'd filed every paper, signed every line. They had an hour to clear out, or they'd be escorted off the property. I didn't stay to watch. I didn't need to. I already knew how it would end. Instead, I went back to Olivia's parents' house, opened my laptop, and called my attorney. The eviction was only step 1. Step 2? A civil suit against my parents and my sister. Her name had shown up on 2 of the charges. Theft. Misappropriation of funds. Financial fraud. That account had once carried both of our names, but legally, it was mine now. And I had the paper trail to prove they'd dipped into it without permission. My lawyer called it a slam dunk. Said they'd fold fast, especially once they realized criminal charges weren't just a threat, they were a real possibility. I wasn't chasing money. I was chasing a message. That night, my phone rang from a number I hadn't blocked yet. Aunt Sylvia. She was the only one from my family who'd bothered to show up at my wedding. She sat on my side of the aisle alone, hugged me longer than anyone else. For a moment, I didn't want to answer. But I did. She didn't yell. She didn't beg. She just asked, softly, what was going on. So I told her. Not every detail, but enough: the lies, the Facebook post, the stolen money, the motel. There was a pause. Then she let out a heavy sigh and said, I had a feeling. They were bragging about that trip before they even got back. Said they needed a break from the stress of your wedding. And that was it. The confirmation I'd suspected all along. It wasn't a last-minute choice. It wasn't nerves or a moment of weakness. They'd planned to skip my wedding from the start. The whole sickness excuse? Just camouflage. After the eviction, they tried every door they could find into my life. Fake numbers. Mutual friends. Even Olivia got dragged into it. My brother went as far as emailing my boss. I cut every cord. Blocked, ignored, deleted. I stopped paying for their utilities, cut off their phone plan, canceled every subscription tied to my name. That house had belonged to me for years. Now it was mine again, fully, completely. 2 weeks later, my lawyer called with news. Settlement reached. A partial refund covering the Hawaii trip, plus legal fees. They'd agreed, on one condition: I dropped the criminal threat. I said yes, not because I was letting them off easy, but because I wanted a record. Proof. A paper that said they had paid me back. Something permanent. Something they couldn't erase or spin into a different story. I cashed the check. Framed the receipt. And that was the end of it. Or so I thought. 2 months later, Olivia and I were curled up on the couch, halfway through a movie, when it started. Banging. Heavy, frantic. The kind that rattles the doorframe. Olivia muted the TV. My stomach tightened. I pulled up the security feed. There they were. My mom. My dad. My sister. All 3 of them. Thinner. Pale. Sweaty. Eyes wide and desperate. My mom sobbed, her voice cracking. My dad shouted, fists against the door. We want to talk. Please open up. We're your family. I didn't move. Not an inch. Because by then, I'd learned the hardest truth of all. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up when it matters. And mine? They'd shown me exactly who they were, smiling on a beach while I stood at the altar alone. For 2 weeks straight, they kept coming back. Sometimes it was just my dad, standing stiff on the porch like he owned the place. Sometimes it was all 3 of them, my mom, my dad, my sister, huddled together, knocking, ringing, calling my name through the door like we were in the middle of some sitcom misunderstanding. But it wasn't funny. It wasn't innocent. And the one thing they never said, not once, was, I'm sorry. Instead, it was excuse after excuse. Like missing my wedding, draining my account, and lying to my face was nothing more than a scheduling conflict. I never opened the door. Not once. I let their words fade into the empty air, let their calls pile up unanswered. Eventually the phone stopped buzzing. The texts dried up. The knocking slowed, then vanished altogether. But then came the letters. Handwritten, folded sheets slipped under the door or left in the mailbox. My mom's handwriting. Pleading words. Playing the guilt card, how much she missed me, how hard things had been, how families shouldn't punish each other. I didn't write back. I didn't even read most of them. I just kept moving forward. Olivia and I worked on the house. My house. We knocked down the old dining room wall, repainted the entire second floor, landscaped the yard until it finally looked alive again. With every change, with every nail hammered and every brushstroke laid down, the place felt less like a museum of their lies and more like a home. My home. Our home. Then, one afternoon, came a visitor I wasn't expecting. Olivia's uncle. He'd flown in from Illinois on business, asked if he could stop by. I figured we'd chat about flooring, maybe garden work. But the moment he sat at the kitchen table, I knew this wasn't small talk. He leaned in, his face tight, and told me about a party 2 nights earlier. Some business event. He ran into a guy who used to work with my dad. And apparently, my family's lies weren't confined to whispered phone calls or porch theatrics. No, they'd gone public. The coworker told him I was ungrateful. That I'd turned on my parents after everything they'd done for me. That I was spiraling. And then, the kicker, that I'd embezzled from my own family to pay for my wedding, and now I was trying to pin the blame on them. That was the story floating around. That was their version. I wasn't surprised, but my blood boiled. And when I get angry, I don't yell. I organize. The next morning, I laid it all out. Copies of the full transaction log, flights, resorts, jet skis, every last cocktail and souvenir. Receipts. Bank records. Screenshots. Messages. A trail so clear even they couldn't deny it. Then I wrote a statement. Short. Brutal. Unshakable. I didn't post it on Facebook, that was their playground. I mailed it. To every person I knew they'd been gossiping to. Certified delivery, signature required. I wanted proof that the truth had landed in their hands. And it worked. Quietly, one by one, people began to fall away from them. No more likes. No more comments. No more miss you replies under their perfect little photos. The cracks in their polished family image were spreading. Then came the message that told me everything had shifted. From my cousin Lindsay, the golden child, the one who used to host every holiday, the one they leaned on to keep their facade alive. She wrote, I had no idea. I'm sorry, Ethan. We should have known. That was it. The beginning of the change. The settlement had never really been about money. It was about leaving a scar. A paper trail they couldn't erase, a truth they couldn't spin into another story. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. Because while they were broke, I soon realized they weren't just broke. They were sinking. And when desperate people start to drown, that's when you find out just how far they're willing to go to claw their way back to the surface. It started with a grocery receipt. Olivia and I were sitting at the kitchen table, sorting through our monthly budget when she pointed at a charge neither of us recognized. Green Path Insurance. $2,674.20. I blinked. That name, it was familiar. A few clicks later, it hit me like a punch to the chest, my parents' car insurance. Still set on autopay. Still draining my account. I hadn't touched that car in years. I hadn't even seen it since I moved out of state. But there it was, silently bleeding me dry. I didn't say a word. Didn't even sigh. I just opened a new browser tab and started pulling at every thread I hadn't already cut. And in under an hour, it was like tearing open a wall and finding a spider's nest. 2 active cell phone lines, my sister and brother, still on the family plan. A storage unit across town that had been charging me for 18 months. 3 streaming services. My brother's gym. A digital magazine subscription I hadn't touched since college but apparently my dad still enjoyed. Even their apartment Wi-Fi? Still under my name. I sat there in silence, realizing the ugly truth. I'd been their invisible backbone for years. Covering everything. Carrying them. And they never once said thank you. Never asked if it was too much. They just assumed I'd keep cleaning up their mess. That night, I cut every wire. Closed every account. Cancelled every plan. Drained the joint account and moved the balance into a private bank. Changed all my passwords. Froze my credit. Set fraud alerts. It felt surgical. Cold. Clean. But not silent. The next morning, I woke to 13 missed calls. Voicemails stacked one after the other. My mom's voice, breaking, desperate. My dad trying to sound calm, but his anger dripping through. My sister? Full rage mode. Called me a snake, a spoiled brat, words I won't bother repeating. By noon, Olivia and I were eating leftovers when the living room lights flickered. For a second, I thought it was the weather. Then I remembered, Netflix. I'd cancelled it the night before. They must have tried to watch something, and in that moment, their screen went dark. I turned off their world without even lifting a finger. The next night, they were pounding on Olivia's front door again. I didn't answer. I watched from the upstairs window while my dad yelled about losing the internet, my mom sobbing on the porch, my sister standing to the side, scrolling on her phone like she wasn't even part of the scene. 10 minutes later, they left. The following day, Olivia's dad pulled me aside. My father had called him. That was it for him. He told them flat out never to call again. Said he wouldn't stand by people who could abandon their son, steal from him, and then play the victim. He didn't tell me the rest of what he said, but I could tell from the silence that followed, it hadn't been polite. Then came the email. Subject line, we have nothing left, Ethan. It was from my mom. She wrote that they were 3 months behind on rent. That their car was uninsured and about to be repossessed. That my dad was working out of libraries because they had no Wi-Fi. That my sister was sleeping on a friend's couch, her phone cut off, bills unpaid. And at the end, she wrote, you've made your point. You've proven whatever you needed to prove. Please stop. And for just a second, just 1 week, fleeting moment, I almost felt it. Not pity, but that old reflex, that pull to step in, clean up, save them. But then I remembered. That Facebook post. Real family together. No one left behind. I remembered tying my own tie in the groom's room, alone, because my dad wasn't there. I didn't reply. Instead, I printed the email, slipped it into a folder marked evidence, filed it right next to the lawsuit paperwork. Because a week later, there was another knock. But this time, it wasn't them. It was a man in a navy suit holding an envelope. My father was suing me, claiming the house I'd inherited had never been mine, accusing me of manipulating my dying grandfather, swearing that he'd been promised the property years ago in some secret, unverifiable conversation. It was pathetic. Predictable. Their last card. They weren't begging anymore. They weren't even pretending to want reconciliation. They were trying to take the one thing they had never been able to control. But this time, I'd make sure they lost. Forever. The suit was dead the moment it hit the table. I slid the envelope across to my lawyer, Carlson. Quiet man, steady voice, the kind of person who doesn't flinch even when you drop a story like mine on him. He read through the lawsuit page by page, didn't even raise an eyebrow. When he finally looked up, he just said, "This isn't going anywhere. But we're not just going to kill it. We're going to bury it." And that's exactly what he did. Within 2 weeks, he'd filed a motion to dismiss. Neat, clean, surgical. He attached everything: my grandfather's will, the deed, bank records, screenshots of my family sipping mai tais in Hawaii, the settlement agreement they'd already signed. Proof stacked on proof, receipts layered on receipts. Not only had I repaid them, forced, yes, but legally, I'd made sure there was no wiggle room left. And then came Carlson's add-on, the quiet dagger at the end, a cease and desist order. If they so much as breathed another lie in my direction, if they kept twisting stories, harassing me, poisoning neighbors or mutual friends, we'd escalate. Publicly. Permanently. They didn't even show up for the first hearing. Or the second. Their case was dismissed. Just like that. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. It just felt finished. Like I'd finally sealed the last box, shoved it into storage, and turned the key. But I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove out to the hills where my grandfather used to take me fishing. The old dock was nothing now, just splinters of wood rotting in the sun. But the view? The view hadn't changed. I sat there for a long time, letting the silence stretch. I thought about what he'd say if he saw all this. I don't think he'd care about the money. Or the house. I think he'd look me in the eye and ask me one question: "Are you okay with what you did?" And for the first time in a long time, my answer was yes. I was. When I pulled back into the driveway, Olivia was waiting on the porch. She didn't ask about the hearing. She didn't need to. She just handed me a cold drink, sat beside me, and we watched the sun sink together. A week later, a letter arrived. No return address. Handwritten. It was from my sister. She said she was done with everyone. That after everything fell apart, she finally saw it for what it was. She admitted she never should have gone to Hawaii. Never should have touched my money. She wrote that she was couch surfing, job hunting, trying to piece her life back together. And she didn't ask for anything, not money, not a second chance. Just one line: "I understand if you don't write back." I just had to say it. I read it twice. Then I tucked it away in a drawer. Not with the lawsuit papers. Not with the evidence. By itself. I don't know if I believed her. But I knew one thing: sometimes forgiveness doesn't mean swinging a door wide open. Sometimes it just means building a fence, and deciding carefully who you let past it. And those who stood with me at the altar, those who clapped, who cheered, who cried while my so-called family posed for beach photos, they didn't just show up that day. They stayed. For the first time in my life, I understood: the family you choose will stand when the one you're born into walks away. And that's where I left them. Not with fireworks. Not with revenge. With silence. A clean break. Finally, on the other side of the door.